The train's whistle shrieked through the desert air as Magdalene Fairweather stepped onto the rickety platform, her traveling dress already wilting in the merciless Arizona heat. She clutched her carpet bag with white knuckles, scanning the handful of weathered faces for her intended a mail-order husband she'd never met but desperately needed. "You Magdalene," the voice rumbled like distant thunder. She turned and her breath caught. The man towering before her stood nearly 7 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. Leather chaps hugged impossibly long legs, and a black hat shadowed features carved from granite. This couldn't be Cornelius Whitmore, the gentle shopkeeper who'd written such tender letters. "Ah, yes, but good." Massive hands seized her waist, lifting her as easily as a child's doll. "You're coming with me. Wait. Put me down." Magdalene beat her fists against his chest as he strode toward a magnificent black stallion. "You're not Cornelius. Name's Jedediah Stormcrow," he growled, hoisting her onto the horse's back before swinging up behind her. "Cornelius is dead. Cholera took him last week." The platform erupted in shouts as he spurred the horse forward, but Jedediah's arm locked around Magdalene's waist like an iron band. The desert blurred past in a haze of sage and red rock as they galloped toward the mountains. "This is kidnapping," she gasped, her proper Boston accent sharp with panic. "This is survival." He replied grimly, "You got 2 choices, lady. Come with me willingly, or I leave you for the Apaches. They've been raiding these parts for months." Magdalene's blood chilled as she spotted smoke rising from a distant homestead. Even as she cursed her fate, she knew this savage giant might be her only chance of staying alive in this godforsaken wilderness. Hours passed before they reached his ranch's sprawling adobe compound nestled in a canyon between 2 whirring red cliffs. Jedediah dismounted and pulled her down, his hands surprisingly gentle despite their size. "This is your home now," he announced, leading her toward the main house. "I don't understand." Magdalene's voice trembled. "Why would you? A man needs a wife out here. You need protection." His steel gray eyes met hers. Seemed practical. Practical. Fury blazed through her fear. "You can't just steal a woman like livestock." Something flickered across his harsh features. "Can't I?" Before she could respond, he'd swept her over the threshold into a surprisingly comfortable parlor. Heavy wooden furniture and Navajo rugs gave the room unexpected warmth, while books lined the walls, more books than she'd expected to find in this savage place. "Your room's upstairs," Jedediah said curtly. "Consuela will bring you supper." As his boots echoed away, Magdalene sank into a leather chair, her mind reeling. She was hundreds of miles from civilization, trapped with a giant who'd claimed her like a prize. Yet something in his eyes suggested depths she hadn't expected, a loneliness that matched her own desperate flight from Boston's suffocating society. Outside, wolves howled in the gathering darkness, and Magdalene shivered despite the fire crackling in the hearth. Whatever lay ahead, there was no going back now. Dawn painted the canyon walls crimson as Magdalene descended the stairs, her chin held high despite her wrinkled traveling dress. She'd spent the night plotting escape routes, but the howls echoing from the desert had convinced her to bide her time. Jedediah sat at a massive oak table, making the furniture look child-sized. His hat was gone, revealing thick black hair streaked with premature silver. Without the shadow obscuring his face, she could see the jagged scar running from his left temple to his jaw. "Sit," he commanded without looking up from his coffee. "I prefer to stand." Those gray eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. Wasn't a request. Something in his tone made her knees wobble, but Magdalene forced herself to remain upright. "I demand to know your intentions, Mr. Stormcrow." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Intentions, lady? You're in Apache country now. My intentions are keeping you alive by force." He rose slowly, his full height making the ceiling seem low. "You think that fancy finishing school prepared you for this?" He gestured toward the window, where endless desert stretched to jagged peaks. "Out there, pretty. Manners won't stop a rattlesnake's bite or a war party's arrows." "I'm not helpless," she snapped, though her voice wavered. "Prove it." He strode to a cabinet and withdrew a Colt revolver, placing it on the table. "Go ahead. Take it. Shoot me if you want your freedom so badly." Magdalene stared at the weapon, her hands trembling. She'd never touched a gun in her life, but something in his challenge made her step forward. Her fingers closed around the grip heavier than she'd expected. "Well?" Jedediah's voice was soft as silk. "What's stopping you?" The gun wavered in her grasp as she met his gaze. Instead of mockery, she saw something unexpected: respect. He wasn't afraid of her, but he wasn't dismissing her either. "I won't murder you," she whispered, lowering the weapon. "Then you'll stay." "I'll stay because I choose to, not because you command it." Something shifted in his expression. "Fair enough." The standoff was broken by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Jedediah's manner changed instantly, his hand moving to his gun belt as he strode to the window. "Riders coming hard," he muttered. "Get upstairs. Now. I won't hide like a child, Magdalene." Her name on his lips was a growl. "Those aren't social callers." The urgency in his voice sent her scrambling for the stairs just as gunshots erupted outside. Through the upstairs window, she watched Jedediah emerge from the house, his own pistols blazing as masked men on horseback circled the compound. "Where is she, Stormcrow?" One of them shouted. "We know you got that woman." "Don't know what you're talking about, Vance," Jedediah replied, his voice carrying despite the chaos. "The hell you don't. That fancy piece belongs to us now, Magdalene," gasped as understanding dawned. These men had been watching the train station, waiting for vulnerable women. Jedediah hadn't kidnapped her, he'd rescued her from something far worse. The battle raged for what felt like hours before the surviving outlaws retreated. Leaving two of their numbers sprawled in the dust, Jedediah stood in the courtyard, blood seeping through his shirt sleeve, but very much alive. When Magdalene rushed downstairs, she found him slumped against the doorframe, his face pale with pain. "You're hurt," she breathed, reaching toward his wound. "I'll live." But he didn't pull away as her gentle fingers examined the bullet graze. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked softly. "About the outlaws." His gray eyes met hers. "Would you have believed me?" She considered this, then shook her head. "Probably not." "Then you understand why I did what I did." For the first time since stepping off that train, Magdalene truly looked at the man before her, not the savage giant who'd claimed her, but the protector who'd risked his life for a stranger's safety. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I do." 3 weeks passed like pages in a book Magdalene had never expected to read. Each dawn brought new revelations about the man who'd swept her from the train station, and about herself. Jedediah rose before sunrise, his movements silent despite his size as he tended to his horses and cattle. Magdalene began waking early, too, drawn to watch him work from her bedroom window. There was poetry in the way he handled the animals, his massive hands surprisingly gentle with colts and injured strays. "You don't have to spy on me," he said one morning, not looking up from the mare he was doctoring. "You can come down if you want." Heat flooded her cheeks as she realized he'd known she was watching. Still, something in his tone almost shy made her venture outside. "Her name's Moonbeam," he explained, stroking the mare's silver mane. "Found her caught in barbed wire, half dead from thirst." "She's beautiful." Magdalene reached out tentatively, her breath catching when the horse nuzzled her palm. "You saved her." Seemed like the right thing to do. Their eyes met over the horse's neck, and Magdalene felt something shift between them, a recognition that went deeper than words. The days took on a rhythm. Jedediah taught her to ride, his patience endless as she struggled with the basics. His hands were always there when she faltered, steady and warm. "Relax," he murmured during one lesson, his chest pressed against her back as he adjusted her grip on the reins. "The horse can feel your fear." "I'm trying," she whispered, acutely aware of his closeness. "Try trusting instead of trying." Gradually, she began to understand what he meant. Trust wasn't something she could force, it grew naturally, like the desert flowers that bloomed after rare rains. Evenings found them reading by the fire, the silence comfortable rather than tense. Jedediah's book collection surprised her: Shakespeare and Dickens, alongside practical guides to ranching and medicine. "You're not what I expected," she admitted one night, looking up from a volume of poetry. "What did you expect? A brute? A savage?" She flushed at her own words. "I was wrong. I can be savage," he said quietly, "when I need to be." Something in his tone made her study his profile. The scar, how did you get it? His jaw tightened. My father. He didn't approve of my mother's choice in husbands. Your mother was Lakota, beautiful as a sunrise, fierce as a storm. His fingers traced the scar unconsciously. My father was a cavalry officer who took what he wanted and called it conquest. When she died birthing me, he blamed me for ruining his reputation. Magdalene's heart clenched. He marked you, said I was a reminder of his shame, sent me to live with my mother's people until I was old enough to make my own way. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. Don't be. The Lakota taught me what it means to be a man. Not just taking what you want, but protecting what matters. Their conversations began stretching later into the night. Magdalene found herself sharing stories. She'd never told anyone her suffocating engagement to a Boston banker, her desperate flight west when she'd discovered his other family, her terror at finding herself truly alone for the first time. You're braver than you know, Jedediah said one evening as she finished recounting her journey. Brave? I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. The way he looked at her made her pulse quicken. When had this dangerous man become her safe harbor? When had his presence begun to feel like home? The answer came the night she woke to find him missing from his usual place by the dying fire. Heart pounding, she crept outside and found him on the porch, staring at the star-drunk sky. Couldn't sleep, he said without turning. Neither could I. She settled beside him on the wooden steps, her skirts rustling. You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't taken you from that station? The question made her shiver. I try not to. Vance and his men would have you by now, or the Apaches, or the desert itself. But you did take me. She turned to face him fully. Why? Really why? For a long moment. Only the night sounds answered, owls calling, coyotes singing in the distance. Then Jedediah's voice came, rough with honesty. Because when I saw you standing there, looking lost and brave at the same time, something in me recognized something in you, like calling to like. And what was that? His gray eyes found hers in the moonlight. Loneliness. The word hung between them, truth made tangible. Magdalene felt tears prick her eyes as she realized he was right. They were both outcasts, both wounded, both desperate for connection in a harsh world. I'm not lonely anymore, she whispered. Neither am I when his hand covered hers. She didn't pull away. The first kiss came during a thunderstorm that shook the canyon walls and turned the desert into a muddy river. Magdalene had been helping Jedediah secure the horses when lightning split the sky, sending her stumbling into his arms. For a heartbeat they stood frozen, her hands pressed against his chest, his arms encircling her waist. Rain plastered her hair to her skull and turned his shirt transparent, revealing the powerful muscles beneath. Magdalene, he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. When his mouth claimed hers, she tasted lightning and wild desert honey. His kiss was nothing like the polite pecks she'd endured from her Boston suitor. This was fire and hunger, demand and surrender all at once. She melted against him, her proper upbringing dissolving like sugar in rain. His hands tangled in her wet hair, tilting her head back as he deepened the kiss. And she heard herself moan with a voice she didn't recognize. We should go inside, he murmured against her lips. Yes, she whispered, not caring about propriety, or reputation or anything beyond the need burning in her veins. But once they reached the house, uncertainty crept in. Magdalene stood dripping in the parlor, suddenly aware of her sodden dress clinging to every curve, of the way Jedediah's eyes burned as they traced her silhouette. This isn't proper, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Nothing about the situation has been proper. He moved closer, water still beading on his dark skin. You want to stop, did she? Every rule she'd been taught screamed yes, but her heart and her body whispered something else entirely. I don't know how, she admitted, her cheeks flaming. Something gentle flickered in his fierce eyes. How what, darling, any of this? I was raised to be a wife, but no one ever explained what that meant beyond managing a household and producing heirs. Understanding dawned across his features. Your Boston banker, he never. We were engaged, not married. He said it wasn't proper until after the ceremony. She laughed bitterly. Though apparently it was proper enough with his mistress. Jedediah's jaw clenched. That bastard didn't deserve you. Maybe, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm 26 years old and I've never, she gestured helplessly, never been touched by a man who wanted you for yourself instead of your dowry? The accuracy of his words made her breath catch. Yes, he stepped closer, his hand rising to cup her cheek. I want you, Magdalene. Not your money or your connections or what you can do for my reputation. Just you. The simple declaration undid her completely. When he kissed her again, she kissed him back with all the passion she'd kept locked away for 26 years. His hands were reverent as they began unlacing her dress, pausing frequently to give her chances to stop him. But Magdalene found herself encouraging him instead, her own fingers fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. You're sure? He asked one final time as they stood in only their undergarments, the fire casting golden shadows across their skin. I've never been more sure of anything. What followed was nothing like the clinical descriptions in her mother's marriage manual. Jedediah worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, teaching her pleasures she'd never imagined. When he finally claimed her fully, the brief pain was overwhelmed by a sense of completion so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, they lay entwined before the fire, her head pillowed on his chest as his fingers combed through her damp hair. No regrets? He asked softly. Only that we waited so long, she murmured, pressing a kiss to his collarbone. His chuckle rumbled beneath her ear. It's been 6 weeks, Magdalene. It feels like forever. Outside, the storm was passing, but inside the adobe walls, something new had been born, a bond forged not just in passion but in choice. They had each other now, claimed and claiming, in the most elemental way possible. What happens now? She asked as sleep began to claim her. Now we build something together, he replied, his arms tightening around her, something worth fighting for. As Magdalene drifted off in the circle of his embrace, she realized that her desperate flight from Boston had led her not to ruin, but to redemption. In the arms of this unlikely giant, she had finally found her home. But even as contentment filled her, she couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The desert was unforgiving, and there were forces gathering that would test their newfound love in ways they couldn't yet imagine. For now, though, she was his, and he was hers, and that was enough. Spring brought unexpected visitors to the Stormcrow Ranch. Magdalene was hanging laundry when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon, and something in her chest tightened with premonition. Riders coming, she called to Jedediah, who was breaking a new stallion in the corral. He swung down from the horse, immediately, his hand moving to his gun belt as he squinted at the approaching group. Military, he said grimly, lot of them. 23 soldiers in blue uniforms rode into the compound, led by a man whose silver bars marked him as a captain. Magdalene recognized the type immediately. Boston was full of such men, all sharp angles and assumed authority. Jedediah Stormcrow, the captain demanded, not bothering to dismount. Depends who's asking. Captain Montgomery Pierce, United States Army. His pale eyes swept over the ranch with obvious distaste. We're here about a missing woman, Magdalene Fairweather, abducted from the train station 6 weeks ago. Magdalene's blood turned to ice. Behind her, she heard Jedediah's sharp intake of breath. I'm not missing, she said, stepping forward, and I wasn't abducted. Pierce's gaze fixed on her, and she saw a recognition flicker across his features. Miss Fairweather, your family has been quite concerned. My family, confusion, clouded her thoughts, but I have no. Your cousin Beauregard Fairweather contacted the territorial governor. Seems you disappeared on your way to marry one Cornelius Whitmore, who has since died of cholera. Pierce's smile was cold as winter. Very convenient for Mr. Stormcrow here. Magdalene's mind reeled. Cousin Beauregard, her father's nephew, who'd inherited the family fortune when her parents died. She hadn't seen him in 15 years, hadn't even known he knew of her existence. What does Beauregard want with me? She asked carefully. To ensure your safety, of course. He's prepared to pay handsomely for your return to civilization. The emphasis on the last word wasn't lost on anyone. Pierce's contempt for Jedediah was obvious. His disgust at finding a white woman living with a half-breed barely concealed. I'm not going anywhere, Magdalene said firmly. I'm afraid that's not your decision to make. Pierce finally dismounted, his hand resting on his saber hilt. You've clearly been traumatized by your ordeal. Your judgment is compromised. Jedediah stepped forward, his towering frame making the soldier look small. The lady said no. The lady, Pierce sneered, is clearly suffering from what we might charitably call frontier hysteria. Stockholm Syndrome, the alienists call it. Attachment to one's captor. I wasn't captured, Magdalene snapped. I was saved from what? A respectable marriage to a shopkeeper, from Vance and his gang, who were waiting to claim any unprotected women from the train. She lifted her chin defiantly. Mr. Stormcrow risked his life to protect me. Pierce's expression didn't change. A convenient story, no doubt coached into you. Jedediah's hands clenched into fists. You calling her a liar? I'm saying traumatized women often create elaborate justifications for their circumstances. Pierce's voice was patronizing in the extreme. Miss Fairweather, your cousin has arranged for your passage back to Boston. You'll be given proper medical care and counseling to help you recover from this unfortunate episode. And if I refuse, you're not competent to refuse. Your cousin has petitioned the territorial court for guardianship, given your obvious mental instability in choosing to remain with this person. The insult hung in the air like poison. Magdalene saw Jedediah's scarred face go deadly, look she'd learned to fear. You got papers for this guardianship? He asked quietly. Pierce smiled triumphantly, producing a folded document signed by Judge Harrison in Tucson. Miss Fairweather is to be remanded to military custody for transport to her family. Magdalene's world tilted. Everything she'd found, everything she'd built with Jedediah, crumbling at the whim of a cousin who saw her as a liability to the family name. Over my dead body, Jedediah growled. That can be arranged, Pierce replied, his hand moving to his pistol, resisting lawful authority. Harboring a woman against your family's wishes, plenty of charges we could level. The tension stretched, taut as a wire. 23 soldiers against one man, no matter how formidable. Magdalene could see the calculations running through Jedediah's mind, the same ones racing through her own. I'll go, she said suddenly. Magdalene, no, I'll go, she repeated, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. But not because I'm incompetent or traumatized, because I won't watch you die for me. Pierce looked satisfied. A wise decision. But as the soldiers prepared to escort her away, Magdalene caught Jedediah's eye. In that gray gaze, she saw not defeat but promise. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. How long to reach Boston? She asked Pierce as they prepared to depart. 6 weeks, barring complications. 6 weeks. Enough time for a determined man to plan, to gather allies, to find another way. As the military column rode away, Magdalene looked back once to see Jedediah, standing alone in his courtyard, tall and proud and absolutely lethal. Their eyes met across the growing distance, and she mouthed 3 words that she hoped would give them both strength for what lay ahead. Come for me. His slight nod was her only answer, but it was enough. Jedediah waited exactly 3 hours after the dust settled before saddling his fastest horse. 3 hours to gather supplies, clean his weapons, and plan a pursuit that would either end in reunion or death. He'd lived his whole life as an outsider, but now he had something worth fighting for, something that made the risks worthwhile. The military column was moving slowly, hampered by supply wagons and the assumption that no one would dare challenge United States cavalry. They were wrong. Jedediah knew these canyons and mesa country like other men knew their own faces. While Pierce's soldiers stuck to the main trail, he took shortcuts through Apache passes and hidden valleys, gaining ground with each mile. On the 3rd day, he caught his first glimpse of them blue uniforms stuck against red rock. Magdalene riding side saddle between 2 guards, even at distance. He could see the stubborn set of her shoulders, the way she held her head high despite everything. His woman, his heart, his to claim and protect. That night, he crept close enough to their camp to hear Pierce briefing his sergeants. Double the watch, the captain ordered. We're being followed. By who, sir? One soldier asked. Her savage lover, no doubt. He'll try something before we reach the railroad at Socorro. Yedidiah smiled grimly. Pierce was right about the trying wrong. About everything else. He began his campaign of harassment at dawn. A rope stretched across the trail sent to horses stumbling. Rocks rolled down from high places, spooking the cavalry mounts. Shots fired from concealment never quite hitting anyone, but close enough to keep nerves frayed. "It's him," Pierce snarled after the third day of delays. "That half-breed bastard is playing games with us." But Yedidiah wasn't playing. He was hunting, wearing them down, looking for the perfect moment to strike. It came on the sixth day when a flash flood forced the column to take shelter in a narrow canyon while the waters receded. Pierce posted sentries at both ends, but he couldn't watch the walls above. Magdalene was sitting apart from the soldiers, her hands bound but her spirit clearly unbroken, when a pebble bounced off her shoulder. She looked up to see Yedidiah crouched on a ledge 30 feet above, finger pressed to his lips. Her heart soared. He'd come for her, just as she'd known he would. He gestured toward the supply wagon, then held up 10 fingers twice. 20 minutes. She nodded almost imperceptibly. What followed was a masterpiece of chaos. Yedidiah's first shot shattered the coffee pot, sending scalding liquid flying. His second sent the horses into a panic, rearing and pulling at their picket lines. In the confusion, he rappelled down the canyon wall like a spider, his massive frame moving with impossible grace. "Where is he?" Pierce shouted, whirling with his saber drawn. "Find him." But Yedidiah was already among them, a ghost made flesh. His knife found the ropes, binding Magdalene's hands as soldiers ran past, searching for an enemy who wasn't where they expected. "This way," he breathed in her ear, lifting her onto his shoulder like she weighed nothing. He was halfway up the rock face, Magdalene clinging to his back, when Pierce spotted them. "There. Shoot them down." Bullets whined off stone as Yedidiah climbed with desperate strength. Below, soldiers were finally getting organized, bringing their rifles to bear. They gained the canyon rim just as a volley erupted below. Yedidiah's horse stood waiting, reins ground-tied exactly where he'd left it. He swung Magdalene up into the saddle and leaped up behind her, spurring the animal into a dead run as more shots echoed from the canyon. They rode hard through the afternoon, putting miles between themselves and pursuit. Only when full darkness fell did Yedidiah finally allow their exhausted horse to rest beside a hidden spring. "Are you hurt?" were his first words as he lifted her down. "Only my pride," she replied, then threw herself into his arms with such force it nearly knocked him backward. "I knew you'd come. Couldn't let you go back to that life." His voice was rough with emotion. "Not after what we've found together." "What do we do now?" "They'll keep hunting us." Yedidiah's jaw set in familiar lines. "Then we disappear. Go somewhere they can't follow." "Where?" "My mother's people. The Lakota winter camps. Up in the Dakotas. Pierce's soldiers have no authority there." Magdalene considered this. A life among the Sioux would be harder than anything she'd ever faced, but beside this man, she could face anything. "How long a journey?" 3 weeks, if we push hard and the weather holds." She smiled up at him, her decision made. "Then we'd better get started." They rode north through the night, leaving the settled territories behind for wilderness that promised freedom, if they could survive to claim it. Behind them, somewhere in the darkness, Captain Pierce was no doubt organizing pursuit. But ahead lay possibility, a chance to build something new beyond the reach of those who would tear them apart. The hunt was just beginning. The Lakota camp materialized from the morning mist like something from a vision. Dozens of painted lodges, arranged in careful circles, smoke rising from cooking fires, children's laughter mixing with the soft sounds of daily life. Magdalene's breath caught as they crested the final ridge. After 3 weeks of hard travel through hostile territory, dodging military patrols and sleeping under stars, the sight of home, for she knew instinctively that's what this was, brought tears to her eyes. "My mother's sister lives here," Yedidiah said quietly. "Winona. She'll remember me." An old woman emerged from one of the largest tipis as they approached, her weathered face breaking into a smile of recognition and joy. She spoke rapid Lakota to Yedidiah, who dismounted and embraced her with surprising gentleness. She says, "I've grown too tall." He translated for Magdalene, his scarred face softer than she'd ever seen it. And that I smell like the white man's world. What did you tell her about me? That you're my woman, that we've come home. The words sent warmth flooding through her chest. Home. Not the stifling drawing rooms of Boston or even the comfortable ranch in Arizona, but this wherever they were together. The old woman Winona approached Magdalene with curious but kind eyes, speaking again in her musical language. She wants to know if you're ready to become one of the people. Jedediah translated. What does that mean, learning our ways? Leaving the white world behind completely. His gray eyes searched hers. It means we could never go back, Magdalene. Not to Arizona, not to civilization as you knew it. This would be your life forever, forever. The word should have terrified her, but instead it filled her with unexpected peace. What was she leaving behind, really? A world that had never truly accepted her, that would always see her as property to be traded between men. I choose you. She said simply, I choose us, whatever that means. The wedding ceremony was unlike anything in her experience. No churches or legal documents, just ancient rituals performed under the vast Dakota sky. She and Jedediah stood before the entire tribe as the medicine man spoke words in a language she was only beginning to learn. But when Jedediah took her hands in his massive ones, when he spoke his vows in both Lakota and English, she understood perfectly. He was claiming her not as property, but as partner, promising to walk beside her through whatever trials lay ahead. In your world, they would never accept us, he said, his voice carrying across the gathered people. But here, love is measured not by the color of one's skin, but by the strength of one's heart. The celebration lasted 3 days. Magdalene found herself swept into a life utterly different from anything she'd imagined learning. To tan hides, to cook over open fires, to speak the flowing language of her new people. The women accepted her with surprising warmth, teaching her skills with patient hands and gentle laughter. You are strong, Winona told her through Jedediah's translation. My nephew chose well. As autumn deepened into winter, Magdalene discovered strength she'd never known she possessed. The soft Boston lady who'd stepped off that train seemed like someone from another lifetime. In her place stood a woman capable of surviving blizzards, of turning buffalo hide into warm clothing, of standing guard while her husband hunted. And Jedediah, he blossomed among his mother's people like a desert flower after rain. The loneliness that had haunted his gray eyes faded, replaced by contentment she'd never seen before. No regrets, he asked one night as they lay together in their own lodge, watching snow fall through the smoke hole. Only that we can't go back to the ranch sometimes. She admitted, I love that place. Who says we can't? His arms tightened around her. The army won't hunt us forever. Pierce has bigger worries than one missing woman. The Apache wars are heating up, and they need every man. And when it's safe, we'll rebuild. Make something new. Maybe start that family we've been practicing for. Heat flooded her cheeks, but she smiled against his chest. They had been practicing, and recently she'd begun to suspect their efforts might have borne fruit. Spring brought news that Captain Pierce had been transferred to fight Geronimo in the Sierra Madre, and that cousin, Beauregard, had died in a carriage accident in Boston. With her legal guardian gone and the military distracted, the way was clear for their return. But when summer came and they prepared to leave the Lakota camps, Magdalene realized she was taking more than memories with her. The life growing in her belly was a bridge between worlds, part white, part native, wholly loved. Are you sure about this? Jedediah asked as they rode south, leading a packed train loaded with gifts from their adopted family. Magdalene shifted in her saddle, accommodating the slight swell of her pregnancy, and smiled at the man who'd stolen her from that train platform and given her everything she'd never known she wanted. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The rebuilt ranch rose from the desert like